my face this week.
I know, it's nice. It's nice to see your face.
I know.
It's very cool. Anyway, this week, this is a sticky one this week because I could get in a lot of trouble with this one, but it's nutrition. And before I even sort of before the paint was dry, of course, it's a case of right, what we're going to talk about. And I thought I would mention the fact as to how bad you were as an eater as a child, and I was pretty sure that you were going to die. So you just start.
I've done a lot of research on picky eating since that point, and I can assure you that everything you did according to the literature out there about children and eating was wrong. So
I'm sure.
Maybe you should have read a parenting book or two.
I think all those parenting books are written in hindsight. You know, that's the trouble. Is that and I know that many a grandparent has said this, but I cannot wait for you to be a parent, because I just want to see what you're going to do with it, because that's going to be a lot of fun.
Considering I'm now about to turn 30 and all I've eaten today is leftover pasta pesto that was in a Tupperware box that I found on the side of the kitchen, wasn't in the fridge, and a pack of super noodles, doesn't bode well.
No, I know it's not looking great, is it? But this is the thing. I mean, you see people, you hear people eating all kinds of things. I mean, there was one thing that came out last year about the kid that only ate, I think he only ate tomato soup and toast, and he ended up with some kind of problem. So let that be a lesson to you. But no, I mean, your mum and I tried to get lentils and vegetables and things down you as a child, and it wasn't brilliantly successful, I have to say, all the time. But pasta and broccoli, it seemed to work. We seemed to get pasta and broccoli down you, and you ate it. And I think the problem with nutrition is that, to start off with, is that everybody's got a view. There's a lot of views out there, and actually, I don't think there's one way around. There's one thing that's right for everybody, and I think this is the issue. And the second thing to remember is that the human, and that's why we're so successful, is incredibly adaptable. We have plasticity built into our system, into our our very nature of who we are. And then that neural plasticity, the ability to adapt ourselves, fascial plasticity, the ability to be able to be bendy or not be bendy, and all those kinds of things. And within that, we also have nutritional plasticity. We have the ability to be able to adapt to our environment according to where we are and what we've got available and what we can eat. If I have to live on berries and nuts for the next 5 years, my body will be able to adapt to do that. It will take some adjustment, as we know. So if you give up coffee, why would anybody give up coffee? Why would anybody want to do that? Or whatever, you give up coffee, then it takes a little while for us to come back. So I don't think that there's a one size fits all thing. But it brings me onto the subject of kind of what we were talking about last week, where there's this pseudoscience that's applied, and that there's a right or a wrong. Everybody goes, right, this is how you eat healthily, and this is how you eat unhealthily. And I think there is an unhealthy. There is no question that there is an unhealthy. And the unhealthy is going to be the stuff where you look at the backside of a packet and you haven't got any of those ingredients in your kitchen. So I think that's probably not going to be long-term very healthy, depending on what you want to do.
Also depending on what those ingredients are, because they don't name salt as salt. They name it as whatever the long sciencey name for it is.
What, sodium chloride, you mean?
That's the one.
I don't think they say so. I think they say salt. I think they do cover things up. And of course you can have a dozen words for sugar, maltose, dextrose, concentrated fruit sugars and all that kind of stuff. There's all kinds of ways you can cover up sugar. But the bottom line is that there's, once you go down that processing route, And the other one that is really bad for you, no question about this, is something called trans fatty acids, so hydrogenated fats. And these are amazingly cool because what you do is you take a fat, and a fat, generally speaking, particularly like butter, is very unstable. You know, it melts at high temperatures and it goes very hard at low temperatures. And that's not really good if you've got a biscuit, for example, you know. So if you ever make biscuits, then they've got a pretty short shelf life. You know, you make some shortbread biscuits and within about 3 or 4 days, they're going to be either soggy or, you know, if you live in the desert, they're going to be crispy. So the food industry has got a problem with this because waste is your enemy in the food industry. So the more you waste, the more you throw away, the more expensive it's going to be. So you want shelf life. And so what you do is you take this fat and you hydrogenate it, and you basically heat it to like 1,000 degrees centigrade, and you fill it full of...
Trans fats get banned in the US?
No, they're not banned. I mean, you decimate the food industry if you banned hydrogenated fats.
They were meant to be phased out by 2019 or something.
Well, that's not happened. I mean, the thing is that a lot of companies have reduced or eliminated. I think Marks and Spencer have got rid of all their hydrogenated fats from their products, from their ready meals. But it's still a big deal. It's still a big thing. And of course, the cheaper your food, the more it's likely to have hydrogenated fats in it. And this is a really interesting thing because we talk about death rates and stuff like that, but it's been estimated that 350 people a week in the United Kingdom, a week, so that's a plane load or a train load, every week, die significantly prematurely from trans fat poisoning, right? So that's a plane load crashing and dying every week from something which is massively preventable.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating when you go shopping on a budget and you think, you know, you go to Aldi and you're like, okay, I've got £6 left to pay, and I'm like, all right, I want some apples. Apples are £1 for 6 Pink Ladies apples, £1.50, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna get biscuits.
This is it. I mean, you go down the
choice between an apple for £1.50 or a pack of biscuits for 20p. Which are you going to go for? If you've got to make that budget spread as far as you can, it's no wonder.
It's a great one. Whenever you look in the Guardian and you look at comments about, there was a woman who was doing a lot of 10p budget cookery, and she was working in the fire service, and she had to sort of quit, and she raised her child on about, you know, 10p meals and stuff like that, and I think 50p a day she was looking at spending on food, and she's called they're called Jack now. And they got a load of abuse on the basis, well, you know, you can cook healthy food, but you go to the supermarket and the food that you can choose, you know, if you've got £1, you can buy an awful lot of calories for £1. And most of those calories are not going to be, like you say, they're not going to be from apples or vegetables. You know, your 2-for-1s and your special offers aren't on vegetables. They're on pizzas. Look at the stuff when you do a Tesco shop at the bottom. You look at the stuff that you want, Jaffa cakes and pizzas and fruit juices and crisps and all the stuff that's junky. And that's because it's cheap to produce, and it's cheap to produce because you fill it with hydrogenated fats and it can sit on the shelf forever. You know, so, you know, you pick up a packet of croissant from Aldi, then, you know, what's the shelf life on that? 6 months or what have you. And the reason it's 6 months is because it's full of hydrogenated fat that's going to keep it fresh forever. So I want to go...
Let's talk some of the classic myths. Number one, carbs are bad.
Well, everything's got carbs in it, right? This is the thing. Everything has got carbs. No matter what you touch, everything has got carbs in it. And over the last couple of years, what we've seen is a lot of things in terms of, you know, Atkins and, you know,
did Atkins.
Keto stuff. I did Atkins. I lost a load of weight on Atkins. I mean, it suits my way of eating. I like eating, you know, that kind of stuff. Carbs are bad. No, carbs aren't bad. Nothing is bad. This is the point. Nothing is bad. You know,
except trans fats.
Except trans fats. Trans fats are basically like sucking toxic sludge through a bendy straw. You know, it's just like
my favorite.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's as toxic as many of the boyfriends you've had. Anyway, so so Cara likes her boyfriends like she likes her waist. Toxic. Except for the current one, obviously. You know, I have to say that. Disclaimer here. Such a dad thing. Anyway, so but apart from trans fats and sugar is another nasty one. You know, you get in America, you in the 70s they grew corn, and what are they going to do with this mountains of corn? Nixon said to all the farmers, grow corn, and so we've already got to find things to do with corn. Now they've made nappies out of it and all kinds of stuff out of it these days. But the big one is high fructose corn syrup. So corn syrup, high fructose, it's like 80s, pure sugar. It's got a massive glycemic index, and it's in everything. And of course, it's in all your McDonald's and all your buns and all your shakes and all your fries and all your buns. You know, have a Mackie D's bun and it's sweet. So high levels of sugar are going to turn into fat, and high levels of fat are going to get deposited, and they're going to be deposited quite often in the forms of triglycerides, which make your blood sticky. That's just how you put blood in. Whereas levels of fat, it's hard to digest fat. Fat doesn't get digested and broken down in the same way that carbs do, and in the same way that that proteins do. They have to, fats have to get absorbed. If you look at my talk on the psoas and cisterna chyli, they have to get absorbed and pushed through your heart. So that's why you need to be careful about the types of fats you have. So carbs aren't bad. As I said, nothing is bad, but a diet that's high in sugar you're gonna struggle with, and that's why we have things like fiber wrapped up in sugar, like an orange or an apple, because it gets released into your system slower. But sugar is sugar is sugar, and this is another myth that I think you were going to mention about, that honey is better for you than sugar.
Good sugars and bad sugars.
Sugar is sugar is sugar. It does the same thing. It hits your bloodstream, and your system goes, it's sugar, let's get it out of it. It doesn't make any difference unless it's wrapped up in fiber. Then it's just got to be taken out of your blood, and your pancreas has to.
Let's talk. The sugar in an apple compared to the sugar in a jelly baby. Same or?
Well, I'm saying the sugar in an apple and the sugar in a jelly baby, once they hit your system, are the same sugars. Yeah, but the difference is that the sugar in a jelly baby doesn't have any way of slowing it down. There's no brakes on it. You gets into your system and bang, it's going to go straight. It needs to get out of your system. So all that sugar hits you hard and hits you now. Your pancreas has to release insulin, the islets of Langerhans, and the insulin has to go out and it has to grab all that sugar on its rowing boats. That's how I remember it. I think of it like that, from the islets of Langerhans, and it has to grab that sugar out of the blood and take it somewhere. Well, where's it going to take it? Well, it can take it to your liver, where it can store it in a form that can be used for about half an hour. Some of your muscles can use it, but it's very specialized. Your brain can use it, but that's really specialized sugar. And the rest just goes on your ass. That's just how it goes. It goes on your butt or wherever you're genetically predisposed to lay your fat down. So, and remember, fat cells just get bigger. You don't get more fat cells. They just expand, and they can expand really quickly. And that's how you get it. It's just energy. Now, how you get that energy, it doesn't make any difference, but it's easier to expand your fat cells with sugar than it is with fat. Fat's quite hard to get into your fat cells. So fructose is all the same. It's fructose, whether it's fruit sugars or whether it's anything else.
You've just got something to slow it down.
Just got something to sort of buffer it and slow it down, and so the release is a bit slower. That's why we talk about fibers. So are we going to do the big one? We're going to talk about are we going to do the V word?
Yeah, I think it's not just the V word though, is it? It's kind of all big claims on a diet and a lifestyle.
So let me be really clear. Do I think we should be eating, heading towards a significantly large element of our diet being plant-based? Absolutely. Do I think that eating much less meat would be hugely beneficial for the planet and for humans? Absolutely. Do I believe that morally and ethically a vegan or vegetarian plant-based diet is a better way forward? Absolutely, unequivocally, I have no doubt about that. Do I think that being vegan is healthier than not being vegan? Absolutely not. There's no evidence. There's no evidence to suggest that. And somebody, Claire sent me this
Well,
link.
there is evidence. It's not that there's no evidence. It's just that you have to unpick that evidence carefully, because where that evidence has come from.
Well, listen to what I said. Is there evidence that you will be healthier being a vegan than not being a vegan? So that's what I'm saying, and that's not what the evidence tells us. And the problem is I don't have a problem with debate. I don't have a problem with the idea of moving towards a plant-based. What I have a problem with is somebody sent me, Claire sent me this thing on Netflix about the game changer. And here is somebody saying that if you are a vegan, you will be a better athlete and you'll have less erectile dysfunction and so on and so forth, and making wild claims that really don't add up. And it's
Is that the one with the whole basketball team where they go from losing to winning by changing their diet?
Yeah, and of course the thing is you have to factor in other things, and the way science works isn't just, well, they went vegan so therefore they won. It's like a case of, well, if a whole team did it, what's the feeling? What's the a whole team doing one thing? It might be, well, a whole team got together and raised money for children's charities, and they, because of the so there's lots of other factors involved in that. There was one in there where it talks about that cow's milk can increase estrogen and lower testosterone. But there were 7 men in that study, and it wasn't about the estrogen. It was about the testosterone. It reduces testosterone secretions, not overall secretions, and it was milk taken from pregnant cows, which is different from lactating cows. Again, that's great. But it's not an either or, and I think this is the thing: is that the either or aspect is a moot argument. And again, one of the arguments in the film was about oh, well, the meat industry produces fun studies about eating meat, and then producers talked about avocados. Well, it was the avocado industry that produced that piece of documentation. When you scratch the surface, you realize that actually what's being done here is that the evidence is being cherry picked to be weighted in favor of an argument, and then the argument falls apart because you've cherry picked the information. So, would you be healthier eating less meat? Maybe, because you're eating more vegetables. The idea of going vegan is one thing. I was healthier because I went vegan, but what if you'd gone, I'm healthier because I cut my meat consumption by 60%, ate better meat that was organic and locally produced, and I increased my vegetable intake? Would the same thing be balanced out? So it's a baby out with the bathwater argument that I find spurious. Going to Shambhala Festival a couple of years ago, they went vegetarian, and my argument isn't about going vegetarian. My argument is the fact that, hang on a minute, you're talking about ethics, but and sustainability, and it's more sustainable. Are you telling me that an avocado that's been flown 6,000 miles from and grown in a place where there's no water and there's deforestation and there's rights abuses is more ethical and more sustainable than a grown down the road? Now, at the moment, if you try to go vegan, if you try to grow all your food, Gesundheit, if you try to grow all your food organically, we don't have the fertilizers that aren't based on animal manure. Well, what are you going to do with the animals? So
well, you scratch the surface. If you're talking about ethics, you could go down that spiral forever. That's a whole different thing, because every vegetable is in some way or another linked to animals and pesticides, and so that argument is kind of infuriating, but less about nutrition. So let's just rein you in there.
The health aspect. So you talk about colon cancer, and you talk about the eating of processed meats increases the risk of cancer, and it's true, it does. There's no question about that. That if you eat bacon and sausages, then your risk increases. But you have to understand what risk, and I think the study, one study they quoted, increase your risk by 17% or 4 times or what have you. And that sounds like a lot, but when you look at the absolute risk, so your absolute risk of contracting colon cancer in your life is like I don't know, 5%, say, and I think it's about that. And if you then said, right, okay, if I ate all this meat, then this processed meat, then my risk increases. But when you break it down, your risk increases from 5% to 6%. And so your rate of cancers are still 6%, rather than, so it's an increase, and I'm not suggesting it's not, um, but it's not as big as we think it is. And that's again where you get this data that comes in, and there's the studies that get pushed out there. And it's the exact example of the fact that this absolutism, whether it be in complementary medicine that we talked about last week, or whether it be in nutrition, you have to be really, really careful about polarizing views, instead of saying, well, what's the middle ground? What's the best thing we can do? Well, the best.
The other interesting kind of discussion that comes up with people turning veganism is what they're replacing that meat source with. So a lot of people are turning to the fake meat alternatives like seitan, which is just basically entirely gluten fried. They're eating a bread sauce fried essentially, and then going, well, I'm healthier. Look at me.
Yeah, well, let's not go down that route in terms of the whole vegan thing. But don't get me wrong. Like I said, I think, how can we make better choices? Well, look, a large chicken that you buy for £3.50, that ain't right, and this mass producing of meat in huge factory plants is a big problem, both environmentally and cheap meat is not the way to go. You go down to the farmer's market and you buy a chicken, it's going to cost you 12 quid, because that's the true cost of the production. And if you did that, you'd eat a lot less meat. So I always say to people, if you imagine you had like 2 acres, 2 acres about the size of a football field, and you could feed a family of 4 on that, but you wouldn't really be feeding a family of 4 on large amounts of meat and dairy and stuff like that. You might have some goats and a couple of pigs or what have you, but you wouldn't have a huge amount of meat, and you'd be living on fruit and vegetables that was very seasonal. You might have some beehives or what have you for your sugar and so on and so forth. But you could happily live on 2 acres, but you wouldn't be having chicken for dinner every night or mince for dinner every night. You wouldn't be able to do that, and you probably wouldn't be having huge amounts of carbs either, because it takes a lot of space to grow.
Where's that lifestyle come from? Where's this whole meat for every meal come from?
Well, it's come from post-war, where food production kicked up. It was this big thing after the war that people have been rationed in terms of everything, and so there was a greater appetite, literally and metaphorically, for everything, we started to eat more, and the portions got bigger, and calorific intake got greater, and suddenly people were eating more, and then we started to have processed foods and takeaways and goodness knows what else, and it became in America, it was things like, what's the bread that's the Wonder Bread stuff, and it was the You Deserve. And of course, all the marketing, you look on Netflix, there's a program called Cooked. And it's Michael Pollan is an anthropologist. Brilliant series. There's only 4.
Gone all muffled. What's happened?
Again?
You've gone all muffled.
I don't know why I've gone muffled. Oh, maybe. Is that better?
Yeah.
So you look at a series called Cooked on Netflix by Michael Pollan, and it's brilliant because it talks about how we've managed to get these tastes together. But really, we used to having strawberries at Christmas and certain products all the year round, and it's just what our lifestyles have become now. We go to the supermarket and we buy a tray of meat, and it's very sanitized and it's very cheap, and we don't go to the butcher and find out what our source is. And maybe Brexit will be better or worse. I don't know for that. But certainly we're eating too much meat, and we're eating too much sugar, and we're eating too much, I think, generally. That's the bottom line.
So if you're trying to base your eating off evidence-based ideas of nutrition, are you ever going to win?
Yes, because the evidence is really clear. For a start, eat less. For a second, eat food. And when I say food, I mean food that you can recognize as being ingredients that you can identify relatively easily. Stuff that, if I make a loaf of bread, it's flour, salt, and water. That's it. There's nothing else goes into it. So I know what's in there, and I know where my flowers come from, and I know the batch number and all that kind of stuff. So that's it, and the same thing the same can't be said but we could choose to eat our food in a lot more simple ways. And the accessibility of that food is there. If you want to eat meat, know where your meat comes from, know where your source is. And again, it's easier to do now than ever with the internet. You can find pork chops from a pig called Chloe in Wales, and have a picture of it if you want, if that floats your boat, or you can choose to eat vegan. But I think if you were going to eat more vegetable based, then try and eat seasonally. It's a problem. It really is a problem, because we've been so used to things now. We've got this desire and this taste for the exotic, and the luxury of having things all year round. And food is cheap, generally speaking. But people tend, in spite of all the proliferation of food programs, the tendency is for people not to cook in the same way that it did. But I think my advice and the solution is to keep it simple to people, and that to avoid anything that sounds really amazing as far as a diet is concerned, or a way of eating, probably isn't. We've got so many paleos and ketos and maquignons and all these kinds of different ways, and whether it's fast or not. And there isn't one size that fits all. Mediterranean diets, there isn't one size that fits.
Water diet.
Which one?
The water diet.
Is there a clue in the name on that one?
You just drink water for 28 days.
28 days.
It's on a Netflix program. These people go, they check into places and they go on like water fasts.
And there's juice fasts, and there's all this kinds of stuff, and it's going to work for some people. There's no question that some things will work for some people and some won't work for others. But I think moderation is the key. Smaller plates if you want to lose weight, and cook. The process of cooking starts that process of digestion. When you smell an onion being cooked, the process starts of you absorbing that, and the process of digestion starts in smelling, and it's a really important element, and we don't cook enough. So cook and eat your vegetables, girl.
What have you got for dinner then?
What have I got for dinner tonight? I don't know for dinner tonight. I know I did some chips earlier on, so I've probably got a steak.
Well, I've actually, ironically, got vegan fish fingers. So
Fish fingers. How's that work?
it's just like I said. It's like basically gluten wrapped in breadcrumbs with some kind of flavoring on them.
It's amazing. I mean, I've tried the vegan burgers from the beetroot burgers from Lidl. I had those, and they're okay. They're quite nice. I mean, don't forget that, you were raised as a vegetarian. We were vegetarian for years as a family. There's some protein stuff I tried in Hong Kong, which was based around insects. That was interesting. So, it's getting better. The choices are out there, and we all need to eat less meat, and we all need to have, more of a plant-based diet. But, I don't think that the one size fits all works. Some people are going to need to eat because that's their culture, or that's their background. Or
without carbs. I get faint. I get woozy. I get cranky.
Jun says, what about yeast? Teresa says, what about yeast? I don't put yeast in my bread, and I don't put.
Are you saying comments?
Yes, I can see the comments. No, I don't make yeast. I make sourdough. So it is just flour and water and salt. That's all I put in my bread. And my sourdough is pretty awesome.
Mine's better.
Thickly on the tongues. What's that? What thickly? Is that with a lisp, or is it thickly on the tongues? Insects. Yeah, so the insect protein is very interesting. There's somebody also that's producing huge amounts of vegetables indoors by growing tilapia in tanks, and using the water that the fish grow in, and the fact they poo in it, to feed all this hydroponic vegetables that are stacked in tiers that go up like 80 feet to the ceiling. It's being done in a warehouse outside London. And then, of course, you've got the fish, and then you've got the vegetables, and you've got the water. And it's
what's the worm that we can now eat? There was an article about it recently saying we can now eat a type of worm.
I think you always could eat worms, Cara. I think that was your staple diet up to the age of about 8 months. when you're living in Australia. So,
Mm.
kind of worms. There's a witchetty grub, of course, in Australia, the famous witchetty grub. But there are, we are going to have to, in order to feed a planet, we're going to have to move towards something different. But as far as health is concerned, I think there isn't necessarily a one size fits all. We are genetically adaptable. We can change radically and quickly to reflect what we want. So beware. The problem with nutrition. There we go.
The other comments.
Julian just basically is saying that, ha, you eat worms. That explains a lot, Cara. So there we go. All right. So next week we are going to do anatomy, which is, oh my goodness. That's a half an hour how am I going to do it in half an hour? Well, I think,
basically your business model.
My business model. Yeah.
It's going to be.
It's a rant, isn't it? So, but I won't be here. I won't be in the UK next week. I will be somewhere different, and hopefully I will be free by the time I speak to you next week. I'll have to quarantine for a little while, so I'll hopefully be able to show you where I am, which could be kind of cool. And I hope you'll join me. In the meantime, please do check out our functional anatomy. I'm heading off into the wild blue yonder to go and dissect and to bring you some incredible stuff in the dissection lab. And I hope you'll be able to join me for that. So if you haven't got into our functional anatomy chat group, what's it called, Cara?
Functional anatomy chat.
Yeah. And functional anatomy chat. So get into that. And we will also be, as I said, doing our live stream dissection coming up in April. I'm very, very excited about some of the things I'm hoping to get into and dissect. And we're looking at doing a whole layer of some fascia in one area there as well, and getting into some viscera, some brain, more on the guts, more on that sort of psoas and stuff like that. So there's going to be.
And we've reduced the price of the first week. So the November course that Julian filmed, the 6 days and all the webinars are now only 125. So you can catch up on that before April when our new 2-week goes out.
Yes. So we have recorded this talk today because, as you can see, we're on Zoom. So we recorded this talk today. So this is going to go, we're going to get that. This will go up on our Facebook page, and then we're also going to put this out onto YouTube as well. It's a half an hour, keeping it short and sweet. Maybe we'll do some webinars later on in the year, and we'll get some experts in who can give us a real view on nutrition and what's going on with that and other things. So join me next week, and Cara will still be in cold Bristol. I won't. I'll be somewhere warm and tropical, all by myself, sadly. When we'll talk about anatomy. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Cara. You can go and have your vegan fish fingers.
Nom nom nom. Bye.